Welcome to the Rudick Report. Today is January 26, 2023. With the recent announcements made by Germany and the United States, the war in Ukraine is now on the verge of a full-blown escalation with NATO. The U.S. government and Germany both said that they would send dozens of tanks to Ukraine, a major shift in aid that gives the war-torn nation more firepower against Russia. Russia expressed anger at the prospect of modern Western tanks being sent to Ukraine, calling it extremely dangerous and saying previous red lines were now a thing of the past. These comments come on the heels of Germany announcing earlier this week that it was ready to send 14 Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine and to allow other countries to send their own German-made tanks to Kyiv. The U.S. also announced its own intention to send Abrams tanks to Ukraine as well. The use of modern Western tanks by Ukraine is likely to add momentum to its efforts to push Russian forces out of occupied areas of the country, particularly in eastern Donbas region, where Russia sees the gifts of tanks as further evidence that the West is fighting what it sees as a proxy war against it in Ukraine. The Russian embassy in Berlin called the German government's decision extremely dangerous and said it takes the conflict to a new level of confrontation. The embassy said the move contradicts the statements of German politicians about the unwillingness of the Federal Republic of Germany to be drawn into the war. Unfortunately, this happens repeatedly. Lastly, it warned that red lines or limits for both sides were now a thing of the past, echoing similar comments from Russia's foreign minister earlier Wednesday as it reacted to the U.S. Abrams tanks being sent to Ukraine, claiming Washington has unequivocally stated its desire to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. There is a hybrid war going on against our country. It is impossible not to notice the reality, the minister added. Russia's ambassador to the United States, Anthony Antonov, slammed the U.S., describing the sending of Abrams tanks as another blatant provocation against the Russian Federation. If the United States sends tanks, it will be impossible to justify such steps using arguments about defensive weapons, he said Wednesday, adding that American tanks would be destroyed just like all other samples of NATO military equipment. Russia has repeatedly warned the West against sending tanks to Ukraine, saying they would be a legitimate target for Russia's armed forces like other NATO weaponry, and would make a prospect for talks to end the war an even more distant possibility. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov commented that, "Now we can only state that there is currently no prospects for entering a diplomatic path. Unfortunately, we see a lot of manifestations of the conviction of several politicians, several experts, the military, and so on, who believe that it is by continuing the war that the security of the continent can be ensured. This is an absurd belief." Konstantin Gavrilov, the head of the Russian delegation to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, has just publicly thrown down the nuclear gauntlet to the collective West in an official statement. Gavrilov said that he has been instructed by his government to announce, "We know that the Leopard 2 tank, as well as the Bradley and Marder infantry fighting vehicles, are armed with uranium core armor-piercing projectiles, the use of which leads to radioactive contamination of the area, as happened in Yugoslavia and Iraq. If such shells are delivered to Kyiv, we will consider this the use of dirty nuclear weapons against Russia with all the ensuing consequences." It is a fact that the United States and NATO do have depleted beryllium and depleted uranium ammunition, which is used as armor-piercing and bunker-busting projectiles. None of these projectiles cause a nuclear chain reaction, so there is no nuclear blast from them. However, when these particle projectiles strike their target, the metal used to make the projectiles, uranium and/or beryllium, are so dense that it punches through whatever it hits. As that happens, layers of the projectile disintegrate into highly radioactive powder, which then travels by air, polluting entire areas for decades. In Afghanistan, when the United States used such weapons against the hideouts of Osama bin Laden, the projectiles went through hundreds of feet of rock in the mountains and shed layers of radioactive material as they penetrated. This radioactive powder then polluted the groundwater for miles inside Afghanistan, leading to contaminating wells, which then leads to horrifying birth defects in almost all pregnant women who drank the water. These effects have been deliberately concealed, but they occurred and are still occurring to this very day. It remains to be seen if these tanks will be modified to remove the DU munitions, but I cannot imagine that the U.S. would not do that, because it would, with 100% certainty, escalate this war with the United States. As it is, the probability of a now nuclear exchange and outright nuclear war just got very, very real. The United States and European countries continued to pledge their support to Ukraine and have backed their alliance with recurrent deliveries of advanced weaponry and money. This support has made it possible for Ukraine to fend off a complete takeover of the country, and without Western aid, equipment, and training, Ukraine would have already suffered defeat to the Russian incursion. This is a classic case of a proxy war, in which the outsiders give allies money, weapons, and other kinds of support, but not at the risk of their own soldiers or civilians' lives. But this may soon change as these new weapons make their way into Ukraine. What do you think? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this report, please give me a thumbs up, and if you are able, please visit my affiliate links to help support this channel. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this is the Rudick Report.